Hey, third and fourth, I'm back here to read another chapter to you today. I'm kind of excited about this next chapter, so I didn't want to stop. So here I am back. This is chapter 3, The Tattletale Cure. So I wonder, do you know what a tattletale is? Well, we're really going to find out in this chapter. So hang tight, sit back, get someplace cozy, somewhere outside, in the shade, or in your house, in your bed, in a chair, on the floor. Maybe you made a fort. Find a place to sit and hear about the tattletale cure. Okay, funny enough, we're in Florida, but it was a cold, snowy day where this was happening, and Mrs. Hamilton gave the hot cocoa a little stir and then went to the kitchen window to see if the children were coming. It was 10 minutes past 3 and almost time for them to be home. Mrs. Hamilton fixed a plate of sugar cookies and got out 2 big shiny red apples. Then, just as the children rounded the corner, she poured the hot, fragrant cocoa. Wendy and Timmy came stamping up on the back porch, and Mrs. Hamilton helped them off with their galoshes, brushed off some of the snow, and hurried them into the nice warm kitchen. "And how was school?" she asked Wendy, as she helped her off with her coat and her leggings. Wendy said, "Well, I hate everybody at school, and everybody at school hates me." Mrs. Hamilton was shocked. Wendy was 9 years old. She had nice fat pigtails, shiny brown bangs, sparkling brown eyes, and pink cheeks. Mrs. Hamilton didn't see how anyone could hate her. She said, "Why, Wendy, that's dreadful, dear. Why does everyone hate you?" Wendy said, "I don't know. They just do. And I don't care because I hate everybody." She sat down at the kitchen table and took a bite of sugar cookie. Timmy, who was 7, was sitting on the floor taking off his leggings. His mother said, "Here, Timmy, let me help you." Timmy said, "No thanks, I can do it myself. You want to know why everybody hates Wendy? It's because she's such an old tattletale. She tells the teacher on everybody, and I hate her too." Uh-oh, these are strong words. We don't like to use that word, hate. Mrs. Hamilton said, "Why, Wendy Hamilton, do you tell on people?" Wendy said, with evident pride, I tell Mrs. Worthington every time anybody whispers or cheats or writes notes. I even told her when Jimmy Merton sucked his paintbrush today. We're not supposed to suck our paintbrushes. We're supposed to use our fingers to make little points with our brushes." She took a little sip of her cocoa and wiped her lips daintily. Wendy was very pleased with herself. Mrs. Hamilton wasn't pleased with her. She said, "Wendy Hamilton, I think that's horrid, telling the teacher about a little thing like sucking a paintbrush." Timmy said, "Oh, she's always in there tattling. She's so busy spying and tattling, she doesn't even have time to play." Wendy said, "You better be careful, Mr. Timothy Hamilton, or I'll tell Mother that you haven't brushed your teeth for 5 nights, and you gave your liver to Spot last Wednesday, and you spent some of your Sunday school money on candy, and last night you read in bed with a flashlight." Timmy said, "Yeah, and this morning you put the rest of your toast in the silverware drawer. You spilled Spot's water and didn't wipe it up, and you ate half the candy I bought with my Sunday school money." Wendy's, quite red in the face, said, "Oh, ba, ba, ba to you, you old crumpet." "Ba, ba, ba yourself, old dog eyes," Timmy said. Wendy said, "Mother, he calls me dog eyes all the time. He says that only dogs have brown eyes." Mrs. Hamilton said, "Wendy, change your school clothes and then go in and start your practicing. Timmy, change your school clothes and then go down in the basement and put away all of Daddy's tools that you got out last night. I must say, you're both so disagreeable. I am sorry you came home from school and spoiled my nice, peaceful afternoon." Mrs. Hamilton went up to her sewing room and closed the door. There was a nice little fire in the grate, and it was very cozy in there, with the radio playing softly, big snowflakes drifting down past the window, and no sounds of quarreling from downstairs. Mrs. Hamilton was letting down the hem of Wendy's summer dresses, and as she sewed, she thought about the tattling and wondered why Wendy had turned into such a horrible little prig. Tattling was a loathsome disease, and she was afraid that Timmy was catching it too. While Mrs. Hamilton sewed and worried, the snow piled up in fluffy white heaps on the windowsills. The coals hummed and blazed in the grate, and from downstairs came da 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 as Wendy practiced the Happy Farmer. Mrs. Hamilton had just reached the stage where she was thinking, "Oh well, it will all straighten out. Wendy is just going through a phase," when the practicing suddenly stopped. The sewing room door was thrown dramatically open, and Wendy announced, "I think you should know that Timmy is just sitting on the basement stairs looking at a book. And when I told him to do his work, he said, 'Oh, go bang on the piano, dog eyes.'" Mrs. Hamilton said, "I didn't tell you to check up on Timmy. I told you to do your practicing." Wendy said, "If I don't see that Timmy does his work, who's going to? You just sit up here and sew with the door closed." Mrs. Hamilton said, "When I need your help, Wendy, I'll ask for it. Now go downstairs and finish your practicing." Wendy turned and flounced down the stairs. Mrs. Hamilton got up and closed the sewing room door. Again, everything was peaceful. The Happy Farmer was thumped out indignantly on the piano, and from the basement there was silence. This lasted exactly 10 minutes. Then the sewing room door opened again, thrown open to reveal both Wendy and Timmy, jostling for position and tattling at the top of their lungs. "She's just an old spy. He's not doing a thing but reading. Nobody likes her, and that includes me. He's the one that ate all those ginger snaps last winter. If you want to know what happened to that old fountain pen that Mrs. Wentworth left here 3 years ago, Wendy took it to school, and Mary Phillips stepped on it, and Timmy owes 13 cents on his library books, and he can't find his card. He called me dog eyes right in front of everybody at recess. She broke my kaleidoscope. He spilled ink in my desk drawer. She hit me. He teases me. Oh, I hope this is not happening in your homes while we're home with brothers and sisters." Mrs. Hamilton marched them to their rooms and closed the doors. "You're to be perfectly quiet and stay in your rooms until dinner time." With a sigh, she went downstairs to start dinner. She had just put the tea kettle on when the telephone rang. "Hello," said Mrs. Hamilton. "Hello," said Mrs. Piggle. "I've just baked gingerbread, and I'm wondering if Timmy and Wendy wouldn't like some. Molly O'Toole is making the tea, and Kitty Wheeling is setting the table." Mrs. Hamilton said, "Oh, that's very kind of you, Mrs. Piggle, but Wendy and Timmy are being so naughty, I have sent them to their rooms to stay until dinner time." Mrs. Piggle said, "Oh, I am so sorry to hear that. What seems to be the trouble?" "Tattling," says Mrs. Hamilton. "Wendy came home this afternoon and told me that she tells the teacher on everyone at school. She also tattles on Timmy, and Timmy tattles on her. I'm really terribly distressed. I simply despise tattletales." "Oh, so do I," said Mrs. Piggle, "but tattletale-itis is certainly a common ailment among children. Johnny said ba ba ba, and I said boo, boo, boo. And Johnny said, 'You're an old ugg.' And I said, 'Is that so? When you are 2? And he said, 'Ha, ha, ha.'" Mrs. Piggle laughed. She said, "I have listened to every kind of tattling there is. I have heard the sneaks, the teacher's pets, the crybabies, the mama boys, the bosses, the little prisses, the whiners, every variety of tattletale, and I know that tattletalers are really unhappy children." Mrs. Hamilton said, "Wendy told me this afternoon that everybody at school hates her because she doesn't care because she hates everybody at school." "At present, that is only temporary," said Mrs. Piggle, "but I do think we should start the tattletale cure right away. I have some marvelous medicine, which I'll send over with Molly O'Toole on her way home. The pills look and taste just like licorice drops, but the effect is quite remarkable. Let me see. Today is Thursday. Better not give that medicine to Wendy and Timmy until Friday night. Give them each a pill Friday night and another one on Saturday. Call me Sunday night and let me know how things are. Oh, by the way, I wouldn't plan on having over any company over the weekend. The tattletalitis cure is rather startling. Goodbye. Give my love to Wendy and Timmy." Then there was a little click, and Mrs. Piggle hung up the phone. Mrs. Hamilton sat and looked at the telephone for a few minutes. Little black pills. Remarkable effect? I wonder what they are, and I wonder what they do. About 5:30, Molly O'Toole, all frosted with snow and starry-eyed from eating hot gingerbread, rang the doorbell and handed Mrs. Hamilton a small package. "A present for Mrs. Piggle," Molly said. "Mrs. Piggle said to tell Wendy and Timmy that she's baking gingerbread next Thursday and for them to be sure to be there." Mrs. Hamilton asked her to come in, but she said no, she had to go home and set the table. And she turned and skipped off into the snowy winter evening. Mrs. Hamilton went into the kitchen and undid Mrs. Piggle's package. There was a small black box marked Cure for Tattletalitis. Inside the box was a small black bottle. Inside the bottle were 4 black pills. Mrs. Hamilton examined the pills very carefully. They looked and smelled just like licorice drops, but she was sure they weren't licorice drops because Mrs. Piggle had said they were magic, and they undoubtedly were. She put the pills back into the bottle, put the bottle back into the box, and put the box on the top shelf of the spice cupboard by the stove. Somehow or other, just seeing that box marked Cure for Tattletalitis made her feel better. She hummed as she got dinner, and she set the table. When Mr. Hamilton came home, he looked so tired that she didn't mention her trouble of the afternoon. Instead, she waited until dinner was on the table before calling the children, and then she pretended not to notice their tight little buttonhole mouths and flashing eyes. When Timmy put almost a half a baked potato in his mouth, and Wendy started to tattle about it, Mrs. Hamilton quickly sent her to the kitchen for the pepper grinder. When Wendy gulped her milk and Timmy opened his mouth to tattle, Mrs. Hamilton said, "Oh, look at poor Spotty. He's so hungry. He has tears in his eyes." By constant maneuvering, dinner was kept tattle-free. But the next morning and afternoon were horrible. The children quarreled and tattled from the moment they got up until they went to bed. Mrs. Hamilton closed her ears and thought of the little black pills. But Mr. Hamilton finally gave Wendy and Timmy each a spanking and told them that they could tattle to each other about him. Just before they went to sleep, and when they had stopped crying sufficiently so that she was sure they wouldn't choke, Mrs. Hamilton gave them each one of the licorice drops. She could hardly wait until morning to see what the magic medicine would do. The next morning it was still snowing, and the children slept late. Wendy was the first downstairs. She came shuffling into the kitchen looking like a cross between a scarecrow and a windmill. She had put on an old, faded, very small pair of summer shorts, a thin, raggedy t-shirt, and some old white sandals of her mother's. She hadn't washed her face, and she had slept wrong on her braids so that one braid pointed north and one pointed south. Her eyes were all squinty and sleepy. Mrs. Hamilton said, "Wendy Hamilton, there is a blizzing outside, and here you are coming downstairs in all your old summer clothes. Go up and put on your blue jeans and a sweater. Wash your face and brush your teeth and bring me the hairbrush." Wendy gave her mother a baleful look and went shuffling back upstairs. Then Timmy came down. He had on his jeans and a sweater, but when his mother went to roll up his sleeves to see if he had washed, she found that he had on his pajamas. And not only that, but under his pajamas he had on his underwear. As Mrs. Hamilton sent him back upstairs to change, she wondered fearfully if the strange outfits her children had put on had anything to do with the magic pills. She certainly hoped not. It was bad enough to have 2 little tattletales, but to have tattletales who slept in their underwear and wore their pajamas in the daytime and wore summer clothes in the middle of winter was, well, nigh unbearable. As Mrs. Hamilton took up the children's oatmeal and poured their milk, she glanced fearfully toward the back stairs. How would they look this time? And what had the magic pills done to them? In no time at all, she had the answers. First, she heard shrill fighting voices, quick chasing footsteps.